Liminal spaces. What are they? I don't know. We're about to find out, I guess. After today's sponsor. Thanks to Dr. Squatch for, I'm just kidding. I'm sure many of you have come across these videos on YouTube, TikTok, or any other creative platform. These strangely familiar places with unnerving music, or unnerving images with nostalgic music. Most of these videos contain low-quality images with empty, lifeless, unnatural spaces, typically with only one light source and no real focal point. I think we should also acknowledge the oddly specific but true videos. For example, she left you last minute at prom, so you're crying in the bathroom while Mr. Brightside plays. Oddly specific and true, kind of? I'll explain. I never really experienced this exact situation, but it does bring back some familiar memories. I'm sure we've all seen our crushes dance with someone else before. I am not done with this point, it'll be important later. The typical reaction amongst audiences are relatively the same. Usually it's fear, nostalgia, loneliness, sadness, you get the picture. These images have gotten sort of a cult following across other forms of media and eventually received the name liminal spaces. Now, if you Google the term liminal, you would get relating to a transitional or initial stage of a process, or occupying a position at or on both sides of a boundary or threshold. Now, to expand further on that, when you look at these images, it will usually trigger a memory of a transitional moment in your life in some way, whether it's physical or emotional. You take one last look at the house you grew up in before you finally move out. You're about to board a plane. Or you're just simply walking through a hallway. What? Now, you may or may not have heard of this little thing called the backrooms. If you haven't heard of the backrooms, basically it's a creepypasta that describes if you no-clip out of reality, you'll end up in these long, segmented hallways. This is pretty much what started the whole cult following of liminal spaces. Now, right off the bat, this one stands out from your typical Slenderman or the totally not written by a scene kid in middle school, Jeff the Killer. I just think this one's really funny. Instead of it being a physical threat, this is just a series of long hallways with 600 million square miles, which if you know basic math, you know that that's more than 3 yards. So it's pretty unique compared to the other ones. For me personally, a lot of these images remind me of video games, especially according to the post, you have to no-clip out of reality in order to access these areas. Now if you're cool, like me, you're probably a gamer, so you most likely know what no-clipping is. However, if you're not cool, and you're not a gamer, and you don't know what no-clipping is, I guess I can help you. No-clipping is a video game term used when a player passes through solid objects, allowing them to access hidden areas of the game that they're not originally intended to. This would include areas in a game that were going to be accessible at one point but were later scrapped in development. Most of these are very sparse and low-quality textures, similar to what's present in these images. In fact, a lot of games tend to have empty, lifeless areas that can simply be accessed just by playing the game itself, especially a lot of older PS1 era games. Not to mention, some games even have segments in which you're walking down a linear hallway that seems to go on forever. Just to name a few, you have games like Silent Hill, both Half-Life games, Gary's Mod, and even Minecraft to an extent. But one game that I really want to talk about, and one that is severely underrated, as a matter of fact, it's the game you're seeing right now, Cry of Fear. Cry of Fear is a survival horror game running on the Half-Life 1 engine, which is honestly pretty surprising considering the amount of custom work put into the game. I mean, if you didn't know any better, you'd probably think it's on the Half-Life 2 engine. This game is essentially liminal space Candyland. I mean, it's got everything. Creepy hallways, empty apartments, lifeless streets, a subway from hell, you name it. Keep in mind, all this emptiness in the game is not a case of the developers being lazy. In fact, the game is supposed to be empty to simulate that feeling of loneliness. Simon, the main character you play as, is a very lonely individual, and you literally get to step into his mind as he's slowly going insane. That's about as far as I'll go with the story, because it's kind of hard to talk about without going heavy into spoilers, and I also just recommend you check it out for yourself. One, if you're into the back rooms and all that stuff, and two, it's just a really good game, and you're not going to waste a penny because it's free on Steam. fair warning though, Cry of Fear does touch on some heavy subjects such as anxiety, depression, suicide, so if you're really sensitive to that stuff, this probably isn't the game for you because it does not pull any punches. Now I know I've only scratched the surface with the whole liminal space concept, and if you want to know more, I highly recommend you check out both of Solar Sand's videos on this topic. He goes much further into detail, and I also want this video to be on the shorter side. Now, many people seem to theorize that these images actually came from an alternate reality, and I shouldn't have to explain this, but no, these are not from some alternate reality that you have to no-clip in order to access. In fact, you could find these places anywhere. Hell, some of the images I'm showing I've actually taken myself. This is one that my friend took. I literally took this one when I was door dashing. The reason why these images have some odd familiarity is because you actually have been to these places. Or, not exactly, but you've probably been somewhere similar. If you were born anytime in the 90s or early 2000s, these probably remind you of a place you've been to as a child. The same thing can be applied to listening to a song or watching a movie you haven't seen or heard in a really long time. Hey, remember that Mr. Brightside video I mentioned earlier? Remember how it brings back similar memories? Yeah, not too different from this. Thankfully, this is only a handful of people, and the majority of the community like this for the vibe it gives off, like myself. I mean, as simple as they are, these pictures can actually be pretty cool. If I had to pick a favorite, I'd probably pick this picture. This image here is what seems to be an empty Blockbuster or video store. And I have a lot of fond memories going to one of these places with my dad every Friday night after school to rent a movie or game for the weekend. Fun fact, I still have a copy of Spider-Man 3 from Blockbuster. They let me keep it for obvious reasons. Another thing I want to mention here is that a lot of the games displayed on the shelf I remember playing a lot in my childhood. I guess this would also be a favorite of mine too. I just like the endless and really unknown nature of this image. Why does it seem to go on forever? Who would build a hallway like this? How would you properly navigate here? How much longer does this video have to be? Why can't I just end it mid-sentence?